Holy crap, they actually did it. The Aggies beat the LSU Tigers 38-23 Saturday night at Kyle Field, and we're going to talk about the whole thing on this episode of the Locked On Aggies podcast.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this Locked On Aggies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is an instant reaction podcast to the Aggies beating the LSU Tigers 38-23 at Kyle Field. I am your host, Joey Ikes. You can find me on Twitter at Joey Ikes. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Aggies. We are jacked about the way this game went down. This game against LSU is exactly the kind of game that shows why this Texas A&M team was so highly ranked coming into this season. The talent level on this team was evident all over the field on Saturday night, and it really showed up with the young players. This was really a coming-of-age type performance for these young freshman and sophomore type players. And Jimbo Fisher even addressed it in his post-game press conference, where he said that this victory came down to the maturation and the growth of the young players on the team. Now, we're going to talk about Jimbo Fisher and what this win means for him, because it's huge in terms of what he's building in this program. But these young players, Moose Muhammad with the two unbelievable catches, including the one-handed touchdown catch, Evan Stewart, very steady, consistent production, what we've been looking for him all year long. Connor Weigman managed the game beautifully and made some absolutely huge, big-time throws in this game. The player of the game for the A&M football team in this one undoubtedly is Demani Richardson. Goes for over 200 yards on the ground, just in a game where he came back from an injury that he missed the last 2 weeks. In the last game of the season, that in terms of standings, there's not going to be a bowl game. There's not going to be any of that kind of stuff. Some people would have considered this a meaningless game for a guy like Devon, who is more than likely going to the NFL next year. After the season he had this year, after what he showed as the lead running back, really the almost the exclusive ball carrier for A&M when he was on the field, or when he was healthy, he really had no reason to play in this game other than to show up for his teammates and to compete and to put something together and to put positive momentum for this program on the field going into this offseason and into 2023. Goes for over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Tough, gritty runs, big explosive runs, everything that we have come to recognize as Demani Richardson as an unbelievable running back showed up. But this game is all about the kids. This game is all about what it means going forward. This game is all about LT Overton and Walter Nolan chasing Jayden Daniels all over the field with pressure. This game is all about Bryce Anderson playing defensive back. This game is all about what the young guys we talked about on the offensive side of the ball, the extremely young, almost exclusively freshman and sophomore offensive line, with the exception of Jayden Robinson. The freshman tight end, Donovan Green, with a couple of really big plays and a touchdown catch. The freshman and sophomore wide receiver, Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad. And as much as and more than anything, it's about the freshman quarterback and the poise that he showed, the ability that he showed under pressure to break the pocket, to make plays on the move as a runner and as a thrower. We saw the poise and the composure on the touchdown pass to Donovan Green, where he's fading out of the pocket, fading backwards out of the pocket because of the pressure that's coming, but knows he's going to have Green breaking open towards the front pylon on the right side, flips the ball out there, trusts his guy to go get it. Unbelievable play. We saw it on the absolute dime of a touchdown pass between two coverage guys right into the breadbasket for Moose Muhammad to make a one-handed touchdown pass. We saw it on the play extension and throw down the field to Moose Muhammad on the next drive, the next offensive play, really, I believe, for A&M. Another big completion down the field to Moose Muhammad. Even on incompletions tonight, which there weren't many, there was one incompletion where it was sort of an RPO play action play, and Evan Stewart ran a slant out of the slot. And the ball was behind Evan Stewart, and he didn't catch it, but they showed a replay angle of this play from behind Connor Weigman. And you saw the moment that he threw the ball. And Evan Stewart was still at least a half step from breaking. And that kind of stuff, that anticipation from a young quarterback like this, the sky is the limit for Connor Weigman. And it's why going into 2023, this A&M team, especially if they're able to pull things together on the recruiting trail, and we'll get to that in a minute and over the course of the next week for sure, if they're able to pull things together on the recruiting trail for 2023, leverage the portal, all that kind of stuff, this A&M team, despite finishing 5-7 this year, is going to be ranked higher than a lot of people think that they should be going into the year. And it's because it comes down to the quarterback, it comes down to the young players, it comes down to all this stuff. And this team, this program needed this performance. They needed this win. I mean, LSU had a shot to go to the college football playoff and play for a national championship. But A&M needed this win more than LSU did. And it was obvious on the field. And we're going to talk about why right after I tell you guys about Underdog. This episode is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, the easiest place to spice up your college football season. It's so easy to get started and play while you're watching your favorite team play. You go to the Underdog website, create your account, and look at the different pick'em choices for any team during the week. You pick 2 or 3 players that you want to play. Really, you can pick anywhere between 2 and 5 across any team, not just the Aggies. Pro football, college football, Major League Baseball when it's in season, the NBA, and decide if they will finish higher or lower than their underdogs total. It's one of the easiest fantasy games to play out there. It's available in over 30 states, and you can win cold, hard cash in just a single game. Sign up with the promo code Locked On. That's one word, Locked On, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Deposit $100, get $100 free. Go to underdogsfantasy.com or visit Underdog Fantasy in the App Store or Google Play Store. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code Locked On. That's one word. Get in on the college football pick'em action today. And this win was absolutely massive for A&M as a football program. We've talked about it a lot on this program throughout the second half of the season, that this Texas A&M football team needed some life breathed into it. It got a little bit when Connor Weigman played against Ole Miss earlier in the year. They scored 28 points. He throws for 330 yards. This is the guy. Here we go. Everything looks really good. And then he got sick and missed the Florida game, and they got beat against Florida. And then Demani Richardson was hurt and missed the Auburn game, and they lost to Auburn. And then he comes out, they beat UMass, and then they have this opportunity. A&M has currently 0 skill players. No quarterbacks, no running backs, no wide receivers, and no tight ends committed in the 2023 class. And with the season that they've had, they've been facing a ton of negative recruiting against them on the recruiting trail from other schools in the state, other schools in the conference, schools on the other side of the Red River, all of these schools recruiting against A&M. Hey, you don't want to go to A&M. Look at that team. They've got a head coach they want to get rid of, but they can't because of the money. They can't score points. They can't win games. They're giving up 300 yards rushing on the ground When you lose 6 games in a row, that kind of stuff is going to happen. What they needed this game. We're just under a month from the early signing period. And we already saw Anthony Hill decommit, the 5-star Denton linebacker who was committed to A&M in late July, the weekend of the pool party, and decommitted a couple of weeks ago, has been in contact with A&M coaches, but we saw him decommit already. And the worry was that other guys, David Hicks, Damian Sanford, those guys have taken visits, and it's completely within their right to take those visits. But when they take those trips and they go to Austin, they take those trips and they go to Norman, they take those trips to Eugene, that they're hearing these messages about A&M. For most of those guys, especially the guys currently committed to A&M, were in attendance at this game against LSU. For a 4-7 football team to play in front of 100,000 plus people at night, crowd going nuts, crowd going crazy, team playing out of its mind, that's the exact atmosphere that you want to put those guys in right before they're making a decision about where they're actually going to sign their national letter of intent to play football. We already know David Hicks is going to take his official visit in the middle of December, right before the signing day. December 16th is when he's going to be in town for his official visit through the 18th. That's perfect timing for A&M. That's exactly what you want. The last thing you want is for him to be somewhere else right before signing day, for somebody else to have the last impression. But this win for A&M is massive because it gives them the ability to sell hope to these young players. It gives them the ability to not only to go to players, to high school players, because there's only so many high school players left. Most of the guys that are uncommitted, there are not that many guys left that are uncommitted for 2023. There are some, but most of the A&M targets are now either committed to A&M and they're recruiting them hard to keep them, like Hicks and Sanford and some other guys, or they are committed to other places, and the only way they wind up at A&M is if they flip them off a commitment. And there's some guys like that we've talked about here. We won't go into those guys specifically here, but trust me, you will hear those names a lot in the next 3 weeks to a month between now and signing day. But if A&M is going to flip those guys, they needed this game. Hey, you saw what happened against LSU. That's what this team is going to be all year starting next year. Come be a part of it. Now there's hope to sell. Add that to potentially a new offensive coordinator hire coming in the next few days, hopefully. Cross our fingers. And add that kind of hope to what Connor Weigman has showed, to what this team showed on offense and defense this week against LSU. And now you've got a recruiting pitch to go to the portal and to tell veteran guys who played at other schools, hey, come to A&M, join these young kids who are here putting on a show, and this is going to be a great season in 2023. Use your last year or two of eligibility here at A&M because it's going to be worth it. You're going to have the chance to play some huge games. And they're going to have the opportunity to do that and to recruit the current guys who are already – imagine how – now, we've heard lots of great things about how this team has handled themselves as a whole through all of the adversity that they faced this year. Jimbo Fisher has talked about the character of this team. He talked about right after the game about how adversity reveals your character and about how these guys never stop practicing hard and never stop playing hard. They were always competitive and all these things, and it showed up with these veteran guys playing big in this last game like Demani Richardson and Devon Achane. For those guys to have that attitude throughout this year and then to get this result with a week and a half to 2 weeks to go until the portal season opens up. That is so extremely valuable and so important. I can't overstate how important this game was in so many ways. And, there's a lot to react to within the game itself today, but this is just the thought that kept coming back to me as I watched this game, was that from a team building standpoint, from a program building standpoint, this game is up there with the Alabama wins and things like that they've had in the past. Because even though the visitor list for 2023 non-committed players wasn't massive, there were some pretty important ones. There was a quarterback from Tennessee who's currently committed to Ole Miss, who was in College Station for this game. Pretty good game for him to be at. The way they played tonight showed so much about this program. That is the reason why you don't find a way to shell out $86 million to fire Jimbo Fisher. I think you go get an offensive coordinator. I've said that for a few weeks. But Jimbo Fisher as the CEO, as the program builder, as the guiding light, grand poobah for the program, a great place for him to be, a great leader in that way. Jimbo Fisher as a day-to-day offensive coordinator in the weeds of the scheme, calling the plays on a down-to-down basis, not necessarily a great place that you want to be in 2023. Before we talk more about this A&M win over LSU, I'm going to tell you guys about Upside. Upside offsets inflated gas prices by giving you cash back on purchases. You can use Upside at gas stations all over the country. Inflation has us all cutting back and thinking about different ways to cut back. Maybe we're carpooling more. Maybe we're eating out less. Maybe we're driving less, buying less food from the grocery store. But we can all agree that there's nothing fun about less. That's why I started using Upside. Upside's an incredible app for anyone who buys gas, groceries, or dines out. With Upside, I don't have to cut back because I get cash back on every purchase. To get started, download the free Upside app and use my promo code LOCKED and get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. Then claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside. Check in at the business, pay as usual with your credit or debit card, and get paid. In comparison to credit card reward and loyalty programs, you can earn 3 times more cash back. The cash back may take a day or two to show up, but that's okay because Upside users are earning more than $1 million in cash back every week. That's probably why they have a 4.8 star rating on the App Store. Download the free Upside app and use promo code LOCKED to get $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's $5 or more cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more using promo code LOCKED. Now that you've made Locked On Sports, or not Locked On Aggies, your first listen, we're reacting to this game here instantly. Make sure you go check out Locked On Sports today. I'm sure they'll be talking about this game. It's the biggest stories, the games that count, the games that matter, the take of the day, all those sorts of things. More than just college football, the NFL, the NBA, MLB, NHL, all the sports. College basketball's ramped up. All the sports, Locked On Sports today. Go check those guys out. Now, is there a way where this win doesn't result in the kind of momentum that we're talking about for 2023? I can think of one way, and that's if when Jimbo Fisher sits down with the athletic director, or when Jimbo Fisher sits down and evaluates his offensive staff, or his staff as a whole, and his team as a whole, if he looks at this and says, hey, what we have, the way we do it, is good enough if the players execute. And we've got these young players growing up. We don't need to make changes on offense. We don't need to make changes in how we call plays because we've got these young players growing up. We've seen what they can do. We scored 38 points on LSU and knocked LSU out of the college football playoff in the last week of the season. We've got our quarterback. We've got our young receivers. The offensive line is going to continue to develop. We will be fine the way it is if we just keep going. That's really the one way that this thing does not become the catapult, the catalyst into the final stages of 2023 recruiting and the final stages and the initial stages of the transfer portal in the next couple of weeks and into December workouts and spring football and fall camp and summer workouts and all of those things. This win at this time in this season has the chance to be so massive when we spent the last 20 minutes talking about why. The only way it turns out that doesn't work out that way is if Jimbo digs his heels in on the way the offense needs to run and uses this game as his reason why. Hopefully, that won't be the case. Hopefully, he's already sort of established what he wants to do. There's been some murmurs about potential candidates. We've talked about potential candidates on this show. We've written about it at aggieswire.usatoday.com, where you can read our Aggies thoughts. But if Jimbo Fisher decides, you know what, we don't need to make those changes after all. We just needed guys to get healthy and play well. And if our guys play well, we're going to win a lot of games in 2023. And I don't think that's the right approach. It's dangerous to consider it. It's almost scary to even consider that idea. But we have to acknowledge it because otherwise we're not being genuine about what this win means. If we can get a real, I don't want to use the word modern because it's something that when you hear these cliches about offenses in college football, especially, it's modern and creative and spread and all of these terms. And none of those terms really are up tempo, all of these terms that are cliche and catchphrases sort of for what a real offense looks like. But if we can just get an offensive coordinator with a very clear picture of what they want to be on offense and a very clear way of communicating that to the players and a very clear way of implementing that on Saturday afternoons and evenings, that will make such a huge difference for this program. And hopefully at this point, after everything they've gone through this year, after all the struggles on offense, Jimbo Fisher sees that too, and this win won't shake him off of that. Now, enough of this downside conversation. We've got to talk about the performance from this A&M offensive line. If there's one A&M assistant coach that I'm almost certain will not be back in 2023, it's probably Steve Adazio, primarily because he was on a one-year contract anyway. He's a former head coach. He's going to have opportunities to go other places, potentially, and considering he was only on a one-year contract, it's a lot easier to make a move away from a guy like that than it is to decide you're going to buy out a first-year coach out of his $3 million contract. Something like that. But we've got to talk about the way this offensive line played, because Harold Perkins, the everything freshman defensive player, was virtually non-existent on the field in this game. I mean, we just talked about how Demani Richardson ran for over 200 yards. A&M goes for 400 and something yards of total offense against LSU, the number 5 ranked team in the country that was bringing a really good defense in here. And A&M just lined up and they beat the crap out of them at the line of scrimmage. It's unbelievable day for those guys. We talk about this game as a jumping off point for so many areas. And this offensive line that will almost certainly be completely back next year. All 5 guys will be back next year. Bryce Foster, the starting center, the guy who is absolutely the best center on this team, missed most of this season due to illness and injury. He should be back next year. Trey Zune, the left tackle, redshirt freshman, will be back next year. Cam Dewberry, the guy who started the last few games of the season at left guard and really provided a good lift at the left guard spot, true freshman. Matt Wyckoff, redshirt freshman, I believe. Layden Robinson, junior, the only upperclassman on the offensive line. After the way that this season went, I would be shocked if he decided to go out and go to the draft, just because I'm sure he feels like he wants an opportunity to put better tape out there and improve his stock in the draft, especially being a guard. Unless you put out really, really high upside elite tape, it's real hard to go out as a guard a year early and be drafted high. If you don't have that, he may as well come back. I hope he will. Reuben Fothery, the right tackle, sophomore there. Really young. I mean, we've talked about this for this whole team, just young, youth everywhere. Another year of development for those guys. Another year of college strength and conditioning. I mean, Cam Dewberry is a true freshman. Going to get a full offseason of college strength and conditioning. This offensive line could be a strength next year. And if it is, we're going to look back at this game against LSU where they won the game in the trenches with the big boys. And they've got a really good class of offensive linemen coming in. They've got some hard work in front of them to keep Chase Basantis, the offensive tackle from Don Bosco in New Jersey, in the loop. But this game will go a long way towards doing that. This offensive line showed up in a big, big way tonight against LSU, and that's going to go a long way towards their success in 2023 and beyond. Guys, that's going to be it for tonight. Our instant reaction to this A&M victory over the LSU Tigers, 38-23. Thanks for joining me. You can find me on Twitter at Joey Ipes. You can find the show on Twitter at Locked On Aggies. Please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. If you're here, smash the subscribe button, like this video. We're going to cover this A&M offseason, the recruiting class, all of this stuff, all through the offseason, right here on Locked On Aggies. You're going to want to make sure that you're a part of it. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. Locked On Aggies. Guys, we're so excited about this win. We're going to recap it all next week, and we're going to go through all the changes, all the news that's going to be coming. There's going to be a ton of news surrounding this team for the next couple of weeks. Transfer portal, new coaching staff, changes, additions, subtractions, all that kind of stuff. Recruiting, the season might be over, the games might be over, but there's so much to cover in the next few months for Texas A&M. I'm Joey Ikes. This is Locked On Aggies. We will see you next time.